I know, they come in handy. Okay, and your name?
My name is Dr. Leah Jarnigan.
And what is your title?
I serve as the Dean of Students.
Okay. And so, what are, some rules, regulations that student organizations on campus have to abide by?
Sure. So we have a variety of different kinds of student organizations on campus. Let me give you a few examples. We have what would be called a student club or organization that would be recognized by our Department of Student Life. Some examples of a student club or organization might be the Chess Club, the Flying Samaritans, the Campus Crusade for Christ, the Women in Gender Studies Student Association. So they may be an organization that comes together, student organization that comes together and is recognized by student life around some kind of outside interest, perhaps around spirituality. Or maybe it's around a major or an academic program that students are involved with and they want to have a club that supports that, like the Journalism Society of America or something. That could be a recognized student club, but those students are together because they're all in a similar academic program. So there's various different kinds of student clubs and organizations. We have about 300 of those on campus right now. Very, very vibrant area. Then we also have what are called sports clubs, and these are organizations of students that have a common interest in competing under the name Cal State Fullerton in a sport club. So some examples of sports club include the Equestrian Club. Even though you don't see any horses on campus, these students actually are participating in equestrian activities and competitions. We have the rugby team. We have the lacrosse team. These sports clubs, we have 18 of them right now, again, recognized by the Office of Student Life. They are recognized and acknowledged as groups of Cal State Fullerton students who are competing locally, regionally, sometimes even western part of the United States. They are not the same thing as intercollegiate athletics. Okay, so I'll distinguish that. So we have sports clubs. We have student clubs and organizations, of which we have about 300. We have intercollegiate athletics. These are not clubs. These are NCAA intercollegiate athletics sports. So as Cal State Fullerton, we are a member of the Big West Conference, and we are a campus that has 13, I believe it is. You might want to check me on that just to make sure. Recognized intercollegiate athletic teams. Baseball, women's volleyball, softball, men's basketball, etc. That's athletics, not a club. That is a sports intercollegiate athletics team. Those students may be scholarshiped, they may be recruited here to play on a team, etc. Sometimes when you see students together, you don't know that what you're looking at is a athletics team versus a sports club, but they're very different. And the policies to each are very different. In the athletics NCAA arena, we have eligibility criteria set for whether a student can be an athlete at Cal State Fullerton that's set by the NCAA, right? And those policies govern what student is eligible, how much scholarship they can receive, what we are able to do with them in terms of any kind of support like housing or not, what we're not allowed to do with them, what GPA they must maintain to be eligible. It is an entirely different area that's governed by the NCAA, which is College Athletics Administration. Okay. In addition to all of those, so we have lots of different kinds of groups here, and each can have its own set of policies. So that's what makes it really fascinating. We also have what's called social fraternities and sororities. So in the fraternity and sorority arena, which are also recognized by student life, so they go through a process of being recognized each year. They also are housed within the Dean of Students area under Greek life, which is one of our departments. So Sigma Phi Epsilon, until very recently, was one of our social fraternities, recognized by Cal State Fullerton, also recognized and chartered to be a chapter of Sigma Phi Epsilon at Cal State Fullerton by their national headquarters. And this is the main difference, I think, between student clubs and orgs and sports clubs and social fraternities and sororities. In the area of sports clubs and student clubs and organizations, you don't have a national governing body. In social fraternities and sororities, you do have national governing bodies.
Okay.
So these are, if you will, umbrella organizations that represent Sigma Phi Epsilon, Sigma Nu, whatever the fraternity may be, who we work very closely with. Because
Okay.
the students who are participating in these social fraternities and sororities must abide not only by Cal State Fullerton policy around student conduct, but by California Title V, California Code of Education, the section on student conduct, which every student is subject to, and by their national headquarters standards and policies on student conduct.
Oh wow. Okay. So there are three different things being
Yes.
watched over. Okay.
Yes. Because they are representing not only Cal State Fullerton, but they're representing their national body, their national organization. So, for example, Sigma Phi Epsilon is a fraternity that, until recently, chartered to have a chapter here at Cal State Fullerton. Down the street, chartered, have a chapter at Cal State Long Beach. Down the street, Cal Poly Pomona. The thing that would, and I'm using this as an example, I don't know that they actually have chapters, the thing that connects those three campuses is that all the students in those three chapters of Sigma Phi all are governed by a national body.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Right, it makes sense.
Whereas the chess club at Cal State Fullerton, there is no national body.
Right.
Or the, I don't know, what do I want to say? Like some kind of card game, I don't know.
Backgammon, chess.
There you go. Yeah. Club at Cal State Long Beach, no national governing body.
Right, okay.
So the students that are in social fraternities and sororities, they have more than one entity that governs. So that means that they have policies. That would be different than a non-fraternity or sorority. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay, good. So when you ask me what are the policies that apply, that's a hard question to answer because it depends on which kind of entity we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, for instance, when I was talking to Marcella and she had mentioned that there was a police report and the school finds out about that, does it come through you or does it go through her or
Sure.
both the school and the national headquarters together?
Right. So things can come to the attention of the Dean of Students office
Okay.
in multiple different ways.
Okay.
It may be that something happens and the Fullerton police respond to a location and there's some sort of law broken. That information, by virtue of having a partnership between Cal State Fullerton and the Fullerton Police Department, that information would not be shared with me directly, but it would be shared with the University Police Department. And then the University Police Department would look at the report and say, okay, Cal State Fullerton students were involved in this incident and a law was broken, or several laws were broken. And I'm not speaking in code about the Sigma Phi situation. I'm just talking in general.
Okay.
And the police department would say, Cal State Fullerton students, okay, that's why they're sharing this with us, because we have jurisdiction for Cal State Fullerton. Do we know anything more about these students? Oh, it says that there's a reference to a fraternity. Then they're going to pick up the phone and call my office.
Oh, okay.
But they're not going to call me directly
Right.
because I have a coordinator of Greek life. And then that person reports to the Associate Dean of Leadership and Multicultural Programs, which is Juanita Razzo. And they're going to call one of the two of them and say, we've gotten a report. It references a fraternity. Do you know anything about this? Right? So that's
Okay.
one way information could come to our attention.
Okay.
Another way could be that a student, any student on campus, has an experience with a fraternity or sorority that they are upset about, concerned about, feel like might be inappropriate, they're afraid, whatever it might be, whatever happened. It's not unusual for a student, any student, to come to the Dean of Students office to say, I had this experience with this group, whether it's a
Okay.
fraternity or sorority or not. It's a club, it's a
Any student
social
organization on
gathering,
campus.
anything.
Okay. Any problems?
And to come here and say, I have this problem and I want to talk to somebody.
Okay.
That's another way that information could come to the attention of this office. Another way is that a national headquarters of a fraternity or sorority that is chartered on this campus may become aware of something that happens. Sometimes students write anonymous letters. Sometimes a parent picks up a phone, makes a phone call, and says, this happened to my daughter. I want to know who's going to do what about it, right? So lots of different avenues. That national office, because they know how important it is that the national headquarters and the campus work closely together, because we each have a stake in what happens with the student organization.
Right.
Would pick up a phone and they would probably call Juanita
Okay.
because we have a relationship.
Right.
So there's lots of different ways that something can get here. Once it does get here, we make a determination as to, do we have an indication, a strong indication, that somehow this is connected to a student organization of any sort, a club, a sports club, a fraternity or sorority. Do we have an indication of that? Now we have a duty to do an investigation. So when you are told that there's a report made, it doesn't have to be a police report.
Okay.
It can be a phone call from a parent. It can be an anonymous letter submitted by a student slipped under our door at night. All these things happen,
Okay.
right? Everybody
Right.
knows, hey, the dean of students probably. Now, they're not talking about me as a person. They're talking about my office.
Your office
And our breadth of responsibility is really around these out-of-the-classroom experiences that students can be a part of. Oftentimes, something will come here. I'll get an email. I have no idea who that person is. And I look into it and I find out, oh, that's a parent of a student who started here a year ago.
Wow.
And I've got a duty now to investigate. What is the concern? What happened? And then we investigate and we find out if any kind of violation of either campus policy. California Code of Regulations is Title V. It is State of California Education Code,
Okay.
issued by the Department of Education. We are subject to it. There's more sections of it than I could ever possibly explain to you, but there is a section on student conduct. What's expected of students?
Right.
We have to look at any kind of allegation of anything or a concern that's presented to us and say, do we think there's a violation of code here somewhere? And if there is, then we have to ask ourselves, who do we think may be responsible for that? And then we have to adjudicate it. In other words, we have to take a student individually or a student organization, a fraternity or sorority, through a process that allows for the most comprehensive and as objective as possible review of the case as presented,
Okay.
and then make a determination if policy has been violated. And then there's the sanction part is what comes next. So it's quite an involved, long process, but it has to be, right? Because you want to ensure the rights of students.
Correct.
You do. You don't want to go on something that doesn't have some validity to it.
Right.
You don't want to hold a student or a group of students responsible for something that you think there's nothing to really substantiate this.
Right.
And this is why sometimes investigations take weeks. And I understand that that can be very frustrating. But before we're going to hold anybody responsible for anything, we want to feel very comfortable that we have enough evidence.
Yeah, I was talking to Maricela about that, and she said it's, it takes a while. That's why things have been going kind of slow since. I think she said it was started back in September, and she's like, it's already
Sounds about
December.
right. Yeah.
So I understand it's a process. Like you said.
And that's why. That's why, because really at the end of the day, you don't want to make snap judgments. Either way, you don't want to not hold someone accountable for their behavior, because the behavior sometimes harms other people. And even if it doesn't harm other people, it harms the standards of our community.
Right.
And if we don't have standards and don't uphold them, then what does our community really mean? So we take it very seriously.
And the reputation's at stake too, as well, especially.
The university, the department, the national headquarters of an organization, So we don't do knee-jerk kinds of evaluations. We work closely with the national headquarters to see what their concerns and determinations are. In some cases, the national headquarters is actively involved in the investigation, as in this case. That doesn't always happen. So we really look to each other to kind of co-decide. What do we think we have? Who's going to do what part? Do we do this together? Are you not concerned? Okay, you're not concerned, but we are. Why is that? Or the other way around. Do you know something we don't know? It's very much a mutually defined and determined kind of process.
Okay. And I have another question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it would be a question for you to answer or Marcella to answer.
Yeah.
she had mentioned there was an issue of hazing involved. What are the school's policies on hazing for student groups like that? What are your...
For individual students, for student groups, for recognized student groups like a fraternity or sorority or a student organization, for even just informal gathering of groups of students, so not an officially recognized group, right? We have a hazing policy. The hazing policy is in our student handbook, so it's absolutely public information, and I encourage you to look at it. It's grounded in California Title V Code of Regulations, a section on student conduct. It talks about hazing and or conspiracy to haze. So there may be situations where students are actively involved in putting someone through an inappropriate experience that's defined as hazing. There may be cases where students knew that a group was doing this and they just simply decided to stand by and not do anything about it, not try to stop it, not try to report it, not try to protect a potential victim of it. So hazing is a pretty broad policy because it needs to be, because there can be a variety of behaviors. So a couple of examples. And if you don't have a student handbook right now, the student handbook is online. If you just go on the university's website and type in student handbook, it'll bring up the most recent one. You will find that any kind of activity that causes a person humiliation, that puts them through mental, we call it mental or physical harm. It's the concept of you will be ostracized if you refuse to, as a means of becoming a member of some kind of community. So sometimes it's physical exertion that's just for the point of making a person do something. Sometimes it's depriving them of food, water, sleep, hygiene. Sometimes it's actually inducing foreign substances, making somebody eat something or drink something that it is not traditionally something that you do, and it's just for the purposes of humiliating that person. Sometimes it's depriving them of knowing what's going to happen to them. So blindfolding people, putting them in a room, depriving them of information or communication and light, and then taking one person out at a time, and you have no idea what's happening to them. So hazing can be a broad array of experiences, but the core around all of them is that there's no educational value. And it is strictly for the purpose of saying, and now you get to be one of us.
And from a school standpoint, you have zero tolerance then for hazing?
Absolutely.
So if any student group on campus, say the chess club, organized, non-organized, if someone comes in here and says they've had a problem with hazing, your job as the dean of students is to look into that, right?
Absolutely.
That's what
Absolutely.
I want
It's very,
so
very
zero
important.
Tolerance.
Yeah, because we don't want students subject to harm. Right? It's not appropriate. Students should have a choice as to whether they want to join a community or not, knowing publicly what the requirements of that community are, GPA, attendance at certain meetings, but it shouldn't be about whether you're willing to run in place for 25 minutes. There's nothing educational about that. Pardon me. Yes.